Facebook Marketplace is the only place on the internet where common sense goes to die in a stranger's driveway. Most of us just want a cheap lamp or a used bike. But these 69 individuals decided to treat a $20 sale like a Supreme Court trial. We are looking at the absolute peak of human delusion, where free is never enough, and used is expected to be brand new. Prepare for a masterclass in unhinged entitlement. 1. You really have to marvel at the sheer audacity of the Facebook Marketplace choosing beggar. One seller listed a high-end designer sofa for free just to get it out of the house, and a woman actually messaged him to complain about the lack of curb appeal during the pickup. She was furious that he didn't have a professional crew to shrink-wrap the couch and load it into her tiny SUV. When he refused to help her lift a 100-pound sectional, she threatened to sue him for emotional distress and claimed his lack of chivalry was a hate crime against single mothers. It is free furniture, Karen. Just take the win and leave the man alone before he calls the zoo to take you back. 2. Nothing screams suburban delusion like a buyer complaining that a used lawnmower is too loud. This guy bought a 20-year-old gas guzzler for $15 and then spent the entire weekend blowing up the seller's phone with complaints because the engine noise was scaring his purebred poodles. He actually demanded that the seller pay for a professional soundproofing kit or refund him double the price for the trauma his dogs endured. He even sent a voice memo of his dogs barking as evidence of the acoustic assault. Some people really think a $15 purchase entitles them to a lifetime of premium tech support and animal therapy. 3. Imagine selling a pair of vintage Nike sneakers and getting a complaint from a buyer who is upset that they do not make him run faster. This absolute legend messaged the seller claiming the shoes were defective because he still couldn't break a 10-minute mile during his morning jog. He was convinced there was a secret mechanical flaw in the soles and demanded a full refund, plus the cost of his gym membership for the month. He even threatened to report the seller to the FBI for consumer fraud. Seriously, buddy, it is a pair of used sneakers, not a pair of rocket boots from a Saturday morning cartoon. 4. Marketplace is a wild place where people try to return things they have already used up. One woman bought a giant bag of potting soil and messaged the seller 3 weeks later demanding her money back because her plants died. Her logic was that the dirt was clearly cursed or lacked the necessary spiritual energy to sustain life in her apartment. She sent photos of her withered ferns and blamed the seller for the loss of her green friends. When the seller pointed out that plants need water, she accused him of gaslighting her and promised to post her story in every local neighborhood watch group. 5. We have all encountered the delivery drama, but this one is truly special. A buyer wanted a $5 toaster delivered 50 miles away during a blizzard and then complained when the seller suggested they meet halfway. The buyer claimed that since she was paying full price for the used toaster, she was entitled to white glove delivery service straight to her kitchen counter. She actually called the seller a classist elitist for not wanting to drive 2 hours in a snowstorm for a $5 profit. The level of entitlement some people feel over a piece of kitchen equipment that probably still has crumbs in it is honestly breathtaking. 6. There is a special kind of madness in buying a used mirror and then complaining that it makes you look old. This lady bought a beautiful ornate mirror and then messaged the seller in a complete meltdown because she didn't like her reflection in the morning light. She claimed the glass was warped to specifically highlight her wrinkles and demanded the seller pay for a professional lighting consultation to fix the vibe of her hallway. She literally argued that the mirror was sold under false pretenses because it didn't have a built-in filter like her favorite social media app. Welcome to the real world where glass doesn't have a beauty mode. 7. One buyer took the cake when he complained about the smell of a used cast iron skillet he bought for $5. He claimed the pan smelled too much like bacon, and as a new vegan, he felt the lingering scent was a personal attack on his lifestyle choices. He demanded the seller pay for a professional deep cleaning service or provide him with a brand new nonstick pan as compensation for the microaggressions his kitchen had suffered. He even suggested the seller should have disclosed the pan's history of cooking meat in the listing. It is a cast iron skillet, man. Seasoning is literally the whole point of the object. 8. You have to love the buyers who treat Facebook Marketplace like a high-stakes legal negotiation. One guy bought a set of used golf clubs and then complained that they didn't come with a free lesson from a pro. He messaged the seller after his first trip to the driving range claiming the clubs were broken because he kept hitting the ball into the woods. He demanded his money back, plus the cost of the lost golf balls and the beer he drank to drown his sorrows. He actually told the seller that selling golf clubs without a performance guarantee is a violation of the Geneva Convention. Some people will do anything to avoid admitting they just have a terrible swing. 9. Geography is apparently a foreign concept to some people on the internet. A woman messaged a seller about a vintage lamp and then spent 3 hours complaining that the seller lived in a neighborhood she didn't like. She demanded the seller move the lamp to a more upscale part of town for the pickup because she didn't want her luxury car seen in a working-class area. When the seller told her to get lost, she wrote a massive public post, claiming she was being discriminated against for her high standards. She literally expected a stranger to relocate their entire life or at least their inventory just so she could feel comfortable buying a $10 lamp. 10. Selling baby clothes is usually a nightmare, but this complaint is the ultimate peak of insanity. A buyer picked up a bundle of infant onesies and then messaged the seller a year later demanding a refund because the baby had outgrown them. She argued that the clothes were no longer functional for her child, and therefore the seller should buy them back at the original price so she could fund the next size up. She called it a circular economy, but most people just call it being a delusional cheapskate. When the seller blocked her, she used her husband's account to send a list of her constitutional rights regarding fair trade. 11. You would think that giving away a massive stainless steel refrigerator for free would make people happy, but you would be dead wrong. One seller was bombarded with messages from a woman who was furious that the fridge didn't come with a complimentary plumbing service to hook up the water line. She actually demanded that the seller pay for a licensed contractor to visit her house because she didn't want to get her hands dirty with the installation. When the seller told her she was being insane, she claimed she was going to report him to the local authorities for offering an incomplete product. It is a free appliance, lady. The only thing incomplete here is your grasp on reality. 12. A buyer picked up a high-end used treadmill for a fraction of the retail price and then had the nerve to complain that it was making him sweat too much. He messaged the seller demanding a refund because the machine didn't have a built-in industrial-strength air conditioning unit to keep him dry during his workout. He literally argued that the listing was deceptive because it didn't explicitly warn him that physical exercise involves perspiration. He even threatened to sue for the cost of his ruined gym clothes and the extra laundry detergent he had to buy. Some people really want the results of a marathon without the actual effort of moving their legs. 13. Imagine selling a beautiful handmade wooden dining table and then getting a complaint that it is too heavy to move. This buyer actually expected a solid oak table to weigh as much as a piece of cardboard furniture from a big box store. After the pickup, he blew up the seller's phone claiming his back was sore and that the seller should pay for a professional massage to compensate for the physical labor. He even sent a photo of his red palms as proof of his suffering. If you wanted something light and cheap, maybe you should have stayed at the dollar store instead of browsing the fine furniture section of Marketplace. 14. There is a special level of petty reserved for people who buy used electronics and then complain about the batteries. A guy bought a vintage handheld gaming console for $5 and then spent 3 days harassing the seller because the included batteries only lasted 2 hours. He demanded that the seller drive to his house with a fresh pack of brand-name alkaline batteries and an apology note for the inconvenience. He actually claimed that his civil rights were being violated because he couldn't play his game during a long bus ride. It is a $5 toy from 20 years ago. Buy your own batteries and get a life. 15. One woman bought a bundle of designer candles at a garage sale price and then complained that they didn't smell like the ocean enough. She actually messaged the seller saying the scent of sea salt and driftwood was too salty, and it was making her thirsty. She demanded a full refund plus a gift card to a local juice bar to help her rehydrate after the traumatic olfactory experience. She even suggested the seller should have provided a sample sniff before the exchange, even though she met the seller in a windy parking lot. Some people really go looking for things to be upset about just to feel something. 16. A guy bought a used mountain bike and then messaged the seller to complain that the tires were getting dirty when he rode it on a trail. He was genuinely outraged that the rubber didn't have some kind of magical self-cleaning coating and demanded the seller pay for a professional detailing service after every ride. He even sent a video of a small pebble stuck in the tread as if it were a major mechanical failure. He actually told the seller that the bike was not fit for outdoor use because it required too much maintenance to keep it looking shiny. It is a mountain bike. The dirt is part of the experience. 17. Technology brings out the worst in people, especially when they don't understand how it works. A buyer picked up a used smart television and then spent the whole night screaming at the seller because it didn't come with a free lifetime subscription to every streaming service on the planet. She was convinced that the smart part of the TV meant she never had to pay for content again. She accused the seller of hacking the device to lock her out of her favorite shows and threatened to bring a private investigator to his house. She literally couldn't comprehend that a $100 TV doesn't come with $1,000 worth of free movies. 18. Buying used pet furniture is always a gamble, but this complaint takes it to a whole new level of weird. A woman bought a luxury cat tree and then demanded her money back because her cat preferred the cardboard box it came in. She blamed the seller for selling a product that was clearly cursed or lacked the necessary feline pheromones to attract her pet. She actually wanted the seller to come over and train her cat to use the tree or face a lawsuit for emotional damages. You cannot blame a stranger for your cat's erratic personality. That is just how cats work and everyone knows it. 19. One buyer bought a set of high-quality winter tires in the middle of a heat wave and then complained that they were making his car feel too heavy. He messaged the seller demanding a refund because the extra grip was affecting his gas mileage during his summer road trip. When the seller pointed out that winter tires are meant for snow, he accused the seller of being a know-it-all and tried to report the listing for being seasonally inappropriate. He actually expected the seller to pay for his extra fuel costs for the entire month of July. Some people should really have to pass a logic test before being allowed on the internet. 20. Imagine selling a used air conditioner and getting a complaint that the air it produces is too cold. A buyer actually messaged a seller saying that the unit was working too efficiently and it was making her house feel like a giant refrigerator. She demanded the seller come over and recalibrate the machine to a more lukewarm temperature because she didn't like having to wear a sweater indoors. She even threatened to call the fire department to report a cooling hazard. Most people would pay extra for an AC that actually works, but this lady found a way to turn a blessing into a legal threat. 21. A buyer picked up a used coffee maker for $10 and then sent a 3-page email complaining that the coffee it made wasn't as good as the local artisan cafe. He blamed the seller's old machine for not being able to extract the complex notes of his expensive beans and demanded a refund plus the cost of his wasted coffee grounds. He actually suggested the seller should have included a professional barista training course with the purchase to ensure a perfect brew every time. If you want world-class espresso, maybe don't buy your equipment from a guy's driveway for the price of a sandwich. 22. Someone sold a used trampoline, and the buyer actually complained that his kids were jumping too high. He messaged the seller in a panic, claiming the springs were too bouncy, and it was a safety hazard that should have been disclosed in the description. He demanded the seller come over and tighten the mat to reduce the vertical height of his children's jumps, or he would involve his lawyer. He actually argued that the trampoline was performing above its intended capacity, and therefore it was a defective product. It is literally a giant sheet of bouncy fabric. Making people jump is the only job it has. 23. A woman bought a used wedding dress for $50 and then tried to return it 2 days later because she decided she didn't like the groom anymore. She told the seller that since the wedding was called off, the dress was now useless, and she expected a full refund plus a little extra for her psychological trauma. She actually accused the seller of selling a jinxed dress that caused her relationship to fail. When the seller obviously refused, she threatened to picket outside the seller's house with a sign about her broken heart. Marketplace is for selling clothes, not for getting a refund on your bad life decisions. 24. Imagine selling a high-powered pressure washer only to have the buyer complain that it is too good at its job. This guy messaged the seller in a total rage because the stream was powerful enough to strip the ancient peeling paint off his driveway. He actually demanded the seller pay for a professional contractor to repaint his entire house, because the clean spots made the rest of his property look trashy by comparison. He literally argued that the machine was a weapon of mass destruction disguised as a cleaning tool and threatened to file a police report for property damage. It is a pressure washer, buddy. It is supposed to clean things, not gently caress them with a mist of lavender water. 25. A buyer purchased a used set of weights and then complained that they were too heavy to carry into his house. He actually messaged the seller demanding a refund because he pulled a muscle trying to lift the 40-pound dumbbells from his trunk. He blamed the seller for not warning him about the physical properties of iron and suggested the listing should have included a health warning for people with weak core strength. He even wanted the seller to pay for his physical therapy sessions for the next 6 weeks. It is literally a box of heavy metal. That is the entire point of the product. 26. One guy bought a used acoustic guitar and then complained that it didn't come with a built-in tuner or a set of spare strings. He messaged the seller saying the instrument was broken because he couldn't get it to sound like the songs on the radio. He demanded the seller drive to his house and tune the guitar every morning until he learned how to do it himself. He actually called the seller a scammer for selling a musical instrument that requires actual skill to play. Some people really think that buying a guitar magically turns you into a rock star without any practice. 27. A woman bought a used microwave and then complained that the light inside was too bright and it was interfering with her kitchen's ambiance. She actually demanded a partial refund so she could buy a dimmer switch for a $20 appliance. She told the seller that the bright light was giving her a headache every time she heated up her leftovers and that the listing should have included a lumen count for the internal bulb. When the seller told her to just close her eyes, she accused him of being insensitive to her sensory needs and promised to report him to the city council. 28. Imagine selling a used umbrella and getting a complaint that it doesn't cover enough area during a literal hurricane. This buyer messaged the seller during a massive storm, claiming the $5 umbrella was defective because his shoes still got wet while he was walking through a flooded street. He demanded a full refund plus the cost of a new pair of leather boots that were ruined by the rain. He actually argued that the umbrella should have been marketed as a personal weather shield rather than a simple rain accessory. Some people expect a piece of nylon to defy the laws of nature for the price of a cup of coffee. 29. A buyer picked up a used baby monitor and then complained that it was picking up ghost noises in the middle of the night. Instead of calling a priest, she messaged the seller demanding a refund because the device was clearly haunted by the spirits of the seller's previous children. She was terrified by the static and claimed the seller had a moral obligation to disclose the presence of paranormal activity in the nursery equipment. She even sent an audio recording of a ceiling fan hum as proof of a demonic haunting. It is just radio interference, lady. Put down the sage and buy some better batteries. 30. The ultimate peak of marketplace entitlement happened when a guy bought a used ladder and then complained that it didn't make him feel safe at heights. He messaged the seller saying he felt a sense of vertigo while standing on the top rung and demanded a refund plus a payment for his emotional distress. He actually claimed the ladder was defective because it didn't have a built-in safety harness or a parachute for the user. He told the seller that selling a ladder without a fear of heights disclosure was a form of criminal negligence. If you are afraid of the clouds, maybe just stay on the ground and leave the DIY projects to someone else. 31. You would think a person buying a used blender for $5 would understand that motors make noise, but some people live in a state of constant surprise. This woman messaged the seller at 2 in the morning, claiming the blender was demonic because the sound of it crushing frozen strawberries gave her golden doodle a panic attack. She demanded the seller pay for a professional pet psychic to heal the dog's aura and insisted on a full refund without returning the blender because she didn't want to drive in the dark. It is a kitchen appliance, lady, not a silent meditation retreat. If you want a quiet smoothie, maybe just mash the fruit with a fork and save everyone the headache. 32. One seller was giving away a massive pile of firewood for free as long as the buyer could haul it away themselves. A man showed up in a convertible with no trunk space and spent an hour complaining that the logs were too dirty to put on his leather seats. He actually had the nerve to ask the seller to individually wrap each piece of wood in plastic wrap and then deliver them to his house for free because he had done the favor of responding to the ad. When the seller told him to leave, he wrote a review saying the wood was too organic looking and lacked the professional finish he expected from a free gift. 33. A buyer picked up a used full-length mirror and then messaged the seller in a complete rage because she didn't like how she looked in it after a long flight. She claimed the mirror was specifically designed to make her look bloated and demanded the seller pay for a professional lighting technician to come to her house and recalibrate her bedroom. She literally argued that the glass was cursed with a negative energy that was ruining her self-esteem. It is a piece of glass hanging on a wall. If you don't like what you see, maybe blame the jet lag and the airport snacks instead of the poor person who sold you a mirror for 10 bucks. 34. Imagine selling a used mystery novel for $1 and getting a complaint because the buyer didn't like the ending. This guy actually tracked down the seller's personal phone number to demand a refund because the main character died in the final chapter. He claimed the listing was misleading because it didn't include a spoiler warning and that the emotional trauma of a sad ending should entitle him to a $10 inconvenience fee. He even threatened to report the seller to the local library for distributing depressing literature. Some people really think a $1 transaction gives them the right to treat a stranger like a personal therapist. 35. A woman bought a used high-end refrigerator and then complained that it was making her food too cold. She actually messaged the seller saying the milk was reaching a temperature that was unpleasant for her sensitive teeth and demanded the seller come over and adjust the internal thermostat for her. When the seller told her to just turn the dial herself, she claimed she wasn't a certified technician and that the seller was being negligent by not providing a white glove adjustment service. She even threatened to call the health department because her yogurt was slightly firmer than usual. Most people call that a working fridge, but for her, it was a kitchen emergency. 36. There is nothing more classic than a buyer who doesn't check the size and then blames the seller for their own mistakes. A guy bought a pair of designer boots and then spent a week harassing the seller because they were 3 sizes too small for his giant feet. He claimed the seller must have used a special camera lens to make the boots look bigger in the photos and demanded a refund, plus the cost of the thick socks he bought to try and make them fit. He actually told the seller that it was a form of physical discrimination to sell shoes that don't fit every human being on the planet. 37. One buyer bought a used universal remote and then had a total meltdown because it wouldn't control his microwave and his smart toaster. He messaged the seller claiming he had been scammed because the word universal implies that it should control every single electronic device in his house, including the garage door and his wife's e-reader. He demanded the seller come over and program his entire kitchen or face a lawsuit for false advertising. He actually argued that the remote was a defective product because it didn't have a button for the air fryer. Some people really need to read the manual before they start making legal threats. 38. A woman was given a free spider plant on Marketplace and then complained 3 months later that it was growing too fast. She messaged the original owner saying the plant was being aggressive and was taking up too much space on her windowsill. She actually demanded that the seller come back to her house and prune the plant for her, or provide a larger pot for free as compensation for the plant's unexpected growth. She claimed the seller had sold her a genetically modified monster without a proper warning label. It is a plant lady. It is literally doing the only thing it knows how to do. 39. A buyer purchased a used vacuum cleaner and then complained that it sucked up a small Lego piece that his son had left on the floor. He actually demanded the seller drive to his house and disassemble the vacuum to retrieve the toy because he didn't want to get dust on his hands. He told the seller that the suction was too powerful and that it was a predatory design meant to steal household items. When the seller suggested he just empty the bag, he accused him of being a heartless monster who didn't care about a child's happiness. If you want a vacuum that doesn't suck things up, maybe just buy a broom. 40. One guy bought a used camping tent and then complained that it was too dark inside when the sun went down. He actually messaged the seller asking for a refund because he was afraid of the dark and the tent didn't have built-in LED chandeliers or a sunroof. He claimed the listing was deceptive because it showed the tent in a bright backyard during the day, but didn't warn him that nighttime involves a lack of light. He even threatened to sue for the cost of the flashlight he had to buy at the last minute. It is a tent in the woods, buddy. The darkness is literally the main feature of the outdoors. 41. Imagine selling a used electric kettle and getting a complaint that the water is too hot. A buyer actually messaged the seller saying the boiling water was a safety hazard and that the kettle should have a feature that automatically cools the water to a drinkable temperature. She demanded a refund and a payment for the tongue burn she got because she didn't wait for her tea to cool down. She told the seller that selling a device that produces boiling water without a medical warning is a violation of consumer safety laws. Most people call that a kettle, but she called it a weapon of mass destruction. 42. A buyer picked up a pair of used sunglasses and then complained that they made the sun look different. He actually told the seller that the tint was too dark, and it was making his afternoon walk feel like a gloomy movie. He demanded a refund because the glasses didn't enhance the colors of the sunset like he saw in a TV commercial for a different brand. He even accused the seller of selling him fake plastic lenses that were distorting his reality. They are sunglasses, man. Their only job is to block the light so you don't go blind while looking at the horizon. 43. There is a special kind of entitlement from people who buy used furniture and then complain about the height. A woman bought a set of dining chairs and then messaged the seller saying they were too low to the ground for her tall family. She demanded the seller pay for a carpenter to add 3 inches to the legs of each chair, or provide a set of free cushions to make up the difference. She actually claimed the listing was a form of height discrimination, because it didn't specify that the chairs were designed for people of average stature. Maybe just measure your table before you go shopping in a stranger's garage. 44. One seller was giving away free decorative rocks for a garden, and a woman messaged him to complain that the rocks were not the right shade of gray. She actually asked him to power wash all 200 rocks and then sort them by size and texture before she would consider picking them up. When the seller told her to get a hobby, she wrote a long post on a local group claiming he was a lazy scammer who was trying to dump his trash on unsuspecting neighbors. They are rocks from the earth, lady. If you want a specific color, maybe go to a high-end boutique instead of a free pile on the curb. 45. A guy bought a used exercise bike and then complained that it didn't move forward when he pedaled. He was genuinely confused that a stationary bike stays in one place and demanded a refund because he wanted to use it to commute to work. He actually argued that the word bike implies a vehicle that travels from point A to point B and that the seller had sold him a broken piece of equipment. He even threatened to report the seller to the Department of Transportation for selling an unregistered vehicle. This is the level of intelligence we are dealing with on the internet these days. 46. A buyer picked up a used alarm clock for $2 and then complained that it woke him up too early. He messaged the seller in a fury saying the clock was set to 6 in the morning and he didn't know how to change it, so it was the seller's fault he lost 2 hours of sleep. He demanded a refund plus a coffee gift card to help him get through the day. He actually claimed the seller had sabotaged the clock as a personal prank. It takes 5 seconds to press a button, but apparently that was too much mental labor for this absolute genius. 47. One woman bought a used garden hose and then complained that the inside of the hose was wet. She messaged the seller saying she was worried about mold and demanded a refund because she expected the hose to be bone dry upon delivery. She actually argued that selling a hose with residual water inside was a biological hazard and threatened to call the EPA to have the seller's house inspected. It is a tube designed to carry water. Of course, there is going to be some moisture inside. Some people really need to find a real problem to worry about. 48. A buyer purchased a used baby stroller and then complained that it was too easy to push. She actually messaged the seller saying the wheels were too smooth and she was worried the stroller would roll away if she ever stopped paying attention for a second. She demanded the seller pay for a professional brake upgrade or provide a refund because the stroller was too high performance for her neighborhood. She literally complained that the product worked too well. You cannot win with some people. If the wheels were squeaky, she would have complained about that too. 49. Imagine selling a set of used curtains and getting a complaint that they block the light. A buyer actually messaged the seller saying the room was too dark when the curtains were closed and she felt like she was living in a cave. She demanded a refund because she wanted curtains that were opaque enough for privacy but still let in 100% of the sunlight. She actually accused the seller of selling her blackout curtains under false pretenses even though the ad clearly stated they were for a bedroom. That is literally what curtains are for. If you want light, just open them. 50. A woman bought a used luxury dog bed for her pampered poodle and then demanded her money back because the dog refused to sleep in it. She blamed the seller for having a house that smelled like a cat and claimed the scent was traumatizing her pet. She actually wanted the seller to pay for a professional pet communicator to find out why the dog was unhappy or face a lawsuit for emotional damages. You cannot guarantee that an animal is going to like a gift. That is between you and your dog. Leave the poor seller out of your domestic pet drama. 51. This guy bought a $5 toaster and then sent a barrage of messages because his cinnamon raisin bagel was not toasted to a perfect golden brown on both sides simultaneously. He demanded the seller pay for his breakfast at a local diner because his morning was ruined by a slightly uneven crust. He actually claimed that selling a toaster without a pre-calibrated bagel sensor is a form of consumer betrayal. It is $5, buddy. If you want culinary perfection, maybe go to a bakery instead of a stranger's garage at 6 in the morning. 52. Imagine selling a 1,000-piece puzzle of the clear blue sky and getting a complaint that it is too difficult to put together. This buyer actually messaged the seller demanding a refund because all the pieces were the same color and it was making her feel frustrated and inadequate. She claimed the listing was a scam because it didn't specify that the puzzle required actual effort and patience to complete. She even threatened to report the seller for selling a product that caused her a mental breakdown. It is a puzzle of the sky. What exactly did you expect? 53. A buyer picked up a used snow shovel for $3 and then had the audacity to complain when it didn't melt the ice on his driveway automatically. He messaged the seller during a blizzard claiming the shovel was defective because his back was sore after clearing the walk. He demanded a full refund plus the cost of a heated massage chair to compensate for his physical labor. He actually argued that the seller should have disclosed that shoveling snow involves manual effort. Some people really think a $3 tool should come with a built-in motor and a personal servant. 54. You have to love the person who buys a high-tech digital photo frame and then complains that it is stalking them. This woman messaged the seller in a complete panic, claiming the frame was changing pictures too fast and was trying to give her a hypnotic seizure. She actually demanded a full refund plus the cost of a private investigator to check if there was a hidden camera inside the wood grain. She was convinced the device was programmed by the government to monitor her living room habits and threatened to submerge the frame in a tub of holy water if she didn't get her money back. Some people really need to go back to paper photos and stay away from anything with a circuit board. 55. A buyer purchased a used bookshelf for $10 and then went on a massive tirade because it didn't come with the hundreds of books shown in the staging photo. He actually expected the seller to give away his entire personal library for free just because they were visible in the background of the picture. He accused the seller of false advertising and threatened to involve the local sheriff to seize the books. He actually argued that the books were part of the aesthetic and therefore legally belonged to him. Some people really have no idea how furniture sales work. 56. One woman bought a used high-end dishwasher and then had a total meltdown because the clean light was too judgmental. She actually messaged the seller saying the bright green LED was shining with a condescending tone and making her feel guilty for not emptying the dishes immediately. She demanded the seller pay for a professional electrician to come over and disable the light or provide a refund for the emotional labor of feeling nagged by a kitchen appliance. She literally claimed the machine was gaslighting her into being a better housekeeper, and she wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. If you are being bullied by a dishwasher, maybe the problem isn't the machine. 57. Selling a used couch is always a risk, but one buyer took it to a supernatural level when she complained that the sofa was haunted by the seller's cat. She claimed that every time she sat down, she felt a ghostly purr and demanded a refund plus the cost of a professional paranormal investigator to cleanse her living room. She actually accused the seller of hiding the fact that their pet had once napped on the cushions, which she believed created a spiritual rift in her home. It is not a ghost lady, it is just a well-loved piece of furniture. 58. A guy bought a used heavy-duty toolbox and then messaged the seller to complain that it was too heavy when he filled it with all of his heavy metal tools. He actually demanded a refund because his shelf collapsed under the weight, and he blamed the box for being too sturdy. He suggested the seller should have made the toolbox out of a lighter material like plastic, even though the listing clearly stated it was solid steel. He even wanted the seller to pay for the repairs to his garage wall. If you want something light, maybe try a shoebox next time. 59. One woman bought a massive bundle of baby clothes and then tried to return them a week later because her baby was too cute for such cheap fabric. She told the seller that she had a sudden realization that her child deserved only the finest organic silks and that the used onesies were now an insult to her family's status. She demanded a full refund and expected the seller to apologize for even offering such common items to the public. She actually called the clothes a form of visual pollution for her nursery. Some parents really need to get a grip on reality. 60. A buyer picked up a used leaf blower and then messaged the seller demanding that they pay his homeowner association fines. This absolute genius was upset because the blower was so powerful it sent all the dead leaves directly onto his neighbor's pristine lawn, and he got a $200 citation. He actually argued that the seller was liable for the fine because the listing didn't include a tutorial on how to aim the air at a specific angle. He demanded a full refund, plus the cost of the fine, and a personal apology to his neighbor written in calligraphy. It is a leaf blower, man. You are the one holding the trigger and aiming the nozzle. 61. Imagine selling a giant solid oak dining table, and the buyer complains that it won't fit through his front door. This guy actually blamed the seller for not knowing the dimensions of a stranger's house and demanded the seller pay for a professional door removal service. He was furious that the table didn't have a magical folding feature that wasn't mentioned in the ad. He actually told the seller that selling furniture that requires a wide entrance is a form of architectural gatekeeping. Maybe measure your own house before you buy a table that seats 12 people. 62. A buyer purchased a used smartphone and then spent the entire weekend blowing up the seller's phone because it didn't come with the seller's personal contacts and photos. She was genuinely confused that the phone had been factory reset and demanded the seller give her access to their private life so she wouldn't have to start from scratch. She actually accused the seller of being selfish for not sharing their network of friends and family. She literally argued that the value of the phone was in the data, not the hardware. That is not how technology or privacy works at all. 63. One woman bought a used winter coat and then complained that it made her look too puffy in her Christmas card photos. She messaged the seller demanding a refund plus the cost of a professional photo editor to slim down her silhouette in the pictures. She claimed the coat was designed to make her look larger than she actually was, and that the seller should have disclosed the unflattering nature of the insulation. It is a down jacket, lady. Its only job is to keep you warm by being thick. If you want to look like a model, maybe don't wear a marshmallow. 64. A guy bought a used exercise ball and then messaged the seller to complain that it was too round and kept rolling away when he wasn't using it. He actually demanded a refund because he tripped over it in the middle of the night and blamed the seller for selling a spherical object that obeys the laws of physics. He suggested the seller should have included a specialized parking brake for the ball to keep it stationary. He even threatened to sue for the bruise on his shin. It is a ball. Rolling is literally the only thing it is supposed to do besides being bouncy. 65. A woman bought a beautiful indoor plant and then messaged the seller a month later screaming because the plant required dirt and water to stay alive. She was under the impression that it was a low-maintenance plant that survived on vibes alone and felt scammed when the leaves started to turn brown. She demanded the seller come over and revive the plant or pay for a new one, because she wasn't informed about the biological needs of a living organism. She actually told the seller that requiring water is a design flaw. Some people should really stick to plastic flowers. 66. This buyer picked up a used coffee mug for 50 cents and then sent a 5-minute voice note complaining that the handle was on the wrong side for a right-handed person. He was genuinely outraged that he had to rotate the mug to pick it up and demanded a refund for the extra physical labor he had to perform every morning. He actually called the seller a left-handed extremist who was trying to push a political agenda through kitchenware. It is a ceramic cylinder with a handle. Just turn it around and drink your coffee before you lose any more brain cells. 67. One buyer bought a used designer rug and then complained that it felt like the floor when he walked on it. He actually messaged the seller saying the rug was too thin and that he could still feel the hard ground beneath his feet, which was a betrayal of his expectations for a soft experience. He demanded the seller pay for a premium, thick rug pad or refund him double the price for the discomfort his toes endured. He actually argued that a rug should feel like walking on a cloud, regardless of the price. If you want to walk on a cloud, maybe try a flight to the stratosphere. 68. A buyer purchased a used television and then messaged the seller to complain that the characters in the movies were being too loud and aggressive. He actually blamed the TV's speakers for the personalities of the actors on the screen and demanded the seller pay for a specialized sound filter to make everyone sound more polite. He claimed the TV was biased toward action movies and was ruining the peaceful atmosphere of his home. He actually argued that the seller should have warned him that the TV is capable of producing loud noises. That is literally what the volume button is for. 69. The absolute peak of marketplace insanity has to be the woman who showed up to buy a $10 birdhouse and then tried to negotiate a price for the seller's actual home. She told the seller that the birdhouse had such good energy that she was now entitled to buy the main property at a massive discount because she had already driven 40 miles. When the seller told her to leave, she refused to get off the porch and claimed she was now a squatting tenant with legal rights to use the kitchen. Some people don't just want your junk, they want your entire life for a bargain. 69 reminders that the general public should probably be supervised at all times. Let's settle a debate that literally ruins neighborhoods. If a used item breaks 10 minutes after the sale, does the seller owe a refund? Or is the buyer just a complete idiot for not checking it properly? I want to see a total war in the comments over this. Tell me why you're right and everyone else is wrong. Blow this up, smash that like button, and subscribe.